I'm Angie Bezick, and I am the Vice Chair of the Legislative Affairs Committee for the Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance Business Council. And I'm with Tom Cosgrove, who is the Vice Chair of the Virginia Peninsula Chamber. And we are delighted today to have Congressman Bobby Scott, the incumbent candidate for the 3rd Congressional District of the U.S. House of Representatives, to join us. Welcome, Congressman Scott.
Good to be here. Thank you.
We are so pleased that you have agreed to join us to talk to the issues that are important to the business community here on the peninsula. We will ask 5 questions that will deal with military, workforce, transportation, economy, and healthcare. And but before we do that, if you would please take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you for the folks who will be watching.
Thank you. I grew up from Newport News. My father grew up in Newport News. I graduated from Harvard College, Boston College Law School, and right after law school came back to practice law in Newport News. I was very active in a lot of organizations, including the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and decided in 1977 to run for the House of Delegates and was successful, served 5 years in the House. When Herb Bateman was elected to Congress, I ran for his seat in the State Senate and served 10 years in the State Senate, and since 1992 served as a member of Congress. But most of those years I served as a member of the Judiciary Committee, Education and Labor Committee, and Budget Committee. I serve now as chair of the Committee on Education and Labor. Throughout that time, I focused really on 3 main areas: education, healthcare, and criminal justice reform. And so that's where I am now, and I'm continuing to work on those issues.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and appreciate you being here today. The first topic we want to bring up is military and defense, and we certainly don't need to explain to you the role that the defense industry plays in our local economy. During his 2016 campaign, then candidate Trump advocated for what he termed a great rebuilding of the armed services, and over the past couple of years, the budget deals have had defense spending of well over $700 billion. Regardless of the outcome of this year's presidential race, would you support, and it's a multi-part question, would you support the continuation of the current efforts to rebuild the armed services? If so, how would you plan to fund the rebuilding given the increasing costs of military personnel and acquisition? Or if not, where would you seek cuts in the defense budget, and how would you reprioritize funding?
Well, first of all, I think the military, you have to recognize that the military is a significant factor in the economy in Hampton Roads, depending on the year, from 40 to almost 50% of the economy of Hampton Roads depends on the Department of Defense. That's not federal spending, that's Department of Defense. And you get Social Security, Medicare, Department of Energy with the energy labs, NASA, and everything else. Department of Defense is a huge contributor to the economy of Hampton Roads, and it's important that we keep that up. I have, over the years, served as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Budget Committee, and the budgets we produced have not cut the defense budget as previous Congressional Black Caucus budgets have done. Some have cut the defense as much as 25%. We've maintained the defense budget. Some of the things that we're working on is maintaining the 2 submarines per year. We're working on a continuing resolution now, and we made sure that the continuing resolution allowed the continuation of the 2 submarines per year. There's always a question as to new starts, but we made sure that the 2 submarines per year could continue under the continuing resolution. If you're building 2 submarines per year, you've got to be repairing 2 submarines a year, so all of the shipyards in the area benefit from that. Yes, indeed, we want to maintain the military spending. The budgeting part is you have to be responsible. If you're going to do the spending, you have to do the revenue. And this is one of the unfortunate realities in Washington, is that one side just looks at the spending part without looking at the revenue part. You have to look at both. And over the years, Republicans have cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes, and put significant pressure on the budget or on defense. And that pressure has resulted in huge deficits. Every Republican president since Nixon has ended up with a worse deficit situation than they started. Every Democratic president since Kennedy has ended up with a better deficit situation than he started. And President Trump was well on his way to keep that tradition going before the pandemic. So we have to be realistic about the budget. And if we want to maintain reasonable defense spending and grow the defense budget, we have to be realistic and make sure we pay for what we spend.
With the notion that we would have a vaccine by the end of the year, and the fact that COVID has sort of leveled everybody economically speaking, what 2 or 3 things would you recommend that Virginia do in order to come out of the gate, so to speak, economically, thriving economically? And what should the business leaders be doing to prepare to be a role model for the rest of the states?
Well, one of the things that we really benefited from was the COVID relief bills. Right after the pandemic struck and people started losing their jobs, the stock market totally collapsed. Dow went from the about 2,800 down below 2,000, and then immediately recovered because the COVID relief bills were actually protecting a lot of people from devastation. We had the Families First COVID relief bills and the CARES Act. The CARES Act is being spent out. We need another COVID relief act to maintain the spending, so that to maintain the economy. So the first thing I would do would be to make sure that we have another COVID relief bill so that we won't have massive evictions, that people who are losing their jobs will have the money to spend that they had before, and that's where the $600 federal relief takes place, and to make sure that people who lost their jobs but were not technically employees, self-employed, independent contractors, gig workers, are eligible for unemployment compensation. They've never been eligible before, and under the CARES Act, they've been eligible not only for unemployment compensation, but also for the $600. That meant that a lot of people who would have been devastated were able to survive. We've seen levels of people applying for unemployment compensation for the first time. Last week was 800 and some thousand. The previous record before the pandemic was about 600 and some thousand. That goes back as long as they've had the unemployment insurance. 600 and some thousand. For the last 22 weeks, we have exceeded that, and it hasn't been close. So we need to make sure that people who are losing their jobs are protected. The other thing we have to do, if we're going to open the economy, we have to open the schools, but they have to be opened safely. And schools cannot open safely unless they have more resources. The GAO did a study a couple of months ago that showed that after the CDC identified ventilation, proper ventilation as an essential element for reopening schools, the GAO had a study that said 40% of the school districts in the country need to repair or replace the HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, in more than half their schools. So you've got 40% of the school systems that aren't even close to being open, and if they don't have more resources, if they didn't have the money to repair and replace ventilation systems before the pandemic, they certainly don't have it now. Getting students to school, you can't pack as many in the bus as you could before, so you need more trips. That costs more money. So the schools need more money. And the first thing to get the schools more money is to have a relief package that includes significant funding for state and local government. If the state and local governments right now are on track to cutting public schools, public education in the tune of about $300 billion. And so anything less than that, if you have nothing for state and local, anything less than that is a net minus in terms of helping the schools open. But if you don't have the schools open, it will be virtually impossible to reopen the economy. And so focusing on reopening the schools safely would be a critical element in helping the economy.
Congressman, the WIOA, the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, is a critical tool that's been used to upskill the underemployed workers and to provide career opportunities for unemployed individuals. It's due to be reauthorized here within the next year. And so what do you see as the current successes and challenges of WIOA, and what, if any, changes to the policy would you prioritize in the reauthorization?
Well, WIOA needs to be reauthorized, and so does the Higher Education Act, and they work closely together. We need to improve K through 12. The best jobs are going to go with those with the best education, and you need a basic foundation. So we need to improve K through 12. But on higher education, we need to make sure that higher education is affordable. We've gotten to the point now where a lot of students are calculating that they can't afford to go to college, and that is a very bad situation for our nation, when people cannot be the best they can be because they can't afford it. When President Johnson signed the Higher Education Act in 1965, he said that it meant that any student in any state could apply to any college or university and not be turned away because the family is poor. And that's the way it was. Any school you could get into, you could go to. If it's a state college, the states was paying 2/3 of the cost. Now it's 1/3. Pell Grant covered about 75% of the cost of a state college. Now it's less than 30%. The rest is student loans, and people unwilling to take out mortgage-sized debt to go to college can't go. So we have to make college more affordable, but we also have to recognize that a 4-year liberal arts degree isn't the only way to get a good job. Just this week, my committee reported a bill on apprenticeships. The bill will provide 1 million new apprenticeship opportunities, basically by identifying industries or job categories, not just the building trades, but others where apprenticeships can help people get the skills that they need. In addition to that, the community colleges have short-term programs, even pre-apprenticeship programs, where young people can get an education, 6 weeks, 10, maybe 16 weeks, where they can acquire the skills. They'll increase their income 25, 50, even 100%. Right now, a Pell Grant can only be used for courses that lead to a college degree. If all it leads to is a good job, you can't use a Pell Grant. Well, that's ridiculous. If it leads to a good job, you need to make sure that the Pell Grant can be used. But you don't want to get some of these colleges, storefront colleges, dipping into the Pell Grant program and not having a good product. But if you look at WIOA, and if you look at community colleges and limit it to that, I think we can get the quality control that we need and get people into these short-term programs with stackable credentials. Nursing is one of the best examples, where you start off with one level of nursing and work up to LPN and RN and all the way up, where you have stackable credentials so that people can get the skills they need to move up. And those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking at in WIOA. And then also, I want to congratulate Hampton University on the $17 million center that will be a one-stop shop for people to come in and be referred to the appropriate service for them for the best workforce development for that person. So we're looking forward to that success.
That's great. Thank you. A two-part question on healthcare, sir. Do you support or oppose repealing the Affordable Care Act? And regardless of what your position is on the ACA, What specific ideas do you have to expand access to healthcare, keep costs down, and ensure that healthcare delivery, that the system remains financially sustainable?
Well, first of all, if you're going to talk about the Affordable Care Act, I think it's fair to say where we were before the Affordable Care Act. Costs were going through the roof. Millions of people every year, millions, were losing their insurance. People with pre-existing conditions couldn't get insurance, or if they could, they had to pay extraordinary amounts of money. And a lot of policies covered everything except what you had. That's where we were. The Affordable Care Act didn't solve all the problems. They covered a lot of them. And as an example of what a good job it did, you can just look at what CBO said about the Republican replacement that passed the House when they had campaigned against it for 10 years. They're going to repeal and replace, repeal and replace. Well, they finally got the president, House, and Senate and had an opportunity to repeal and replace it. And they came up with a bill that CBO said would increase costs 20% the first year. 20-some million fewer Americans would have insurance. The insurance you got will be worse than what you have. And those with pre-existing conditions will see their protections evaporating. So as all the problems the Affordable Care Act has, it pales in consideration to what the replacement would be. There are things that we could do to improve. Virginia took one step in expanding Medicaid for 400,000 people. The cost of the state was negligible, if anything. We were covering a lot of those expenses with state money. You come in with Medicaid expansion money, 90% federal. You get the fact that if you give a doctor $1, he's going to give you 6 cents back in income tax. When he spends it, 6 cents in sales tax. So you almost get your money back with the taxes. And rural hospitals could not survive without the expansion of Medicaid. They were slowly closing. So expanding Medicaid was one of the things Virginia did. And as a national policy, we want to coerce other states into expanding. There are some things we can do to improve it. One is we give, in the marketplace, we give credits up to about $100,000. After that, you're paying sticker price. We could eliminate that cliff and just say you pay a percentage of your income, maybe 8 or 9%. At some point, you'll reach the sticker price, so you don't need a cliff at some point. That's been proposed and is part of legislation that's passed the House. There is a family glitch. If you are afforded, if your employer gives you affordable coverage, you can't go into the marketplace and get credits. There's an unintended glitch. That is, if your family, cost of your family is unaffordable, under the present law, nobody can go in, nobody in the family can go into the marketplace. That wasn't the intent. May let them go into the marketplace, or let the whole family go into the marketplace, but that needs to be fixed. We haven't been able to fix it because the Republicans are unwilling to do anything to help the marketplace. We can increase the credits. Right now, you pay from about 1 or 2% to 9% of your income to health care. Let's reduce that maybe to 8%, maybe to 7%, to make it even more affordable. And we can reduce the incidence of these huge deductibles that I think are outrageous, where people have $5,000 deductibles. For most families, that's essentially the same as no insurance. That's catastrophic insurance. If you're hospitalized with serious illness, you'll kick in, but until then, it's not much help. You do get the benefit of prevention. All your preventive checkups and whatnot are no copays and deductibles, but we need to significantly reduce deductibles. So there are a lot of things we can do to improve it. But when the Republicans say that they have a replacement if it is repealed, and the Supreme Court will have a shot at it in a few days, they have taken you have to look at what they have produced for their replacement. 20% increase in prices, 20-some million fewer insured, pre-existing conditions, worse insurance. they pass that and celebrate it. So I think you have to look at although the Affordable Care Act isn't perfect, it's a whole lot better than the alternative.
Congressman, the final topic today is transportation, and our current transportation management system is complex. It includes public transit, airports, ports, roads, bridges, tunnels, interstates, and they're all governed by a variety of organizations, authorities, local, state, and federal government organizations, and even private entities. Their disparate governance and funding streams impede efforts to provide quality and efficient transportation systems. To address these challenges, particularly as localities and regions grow into mega regions, how do we create a structure where all the puzzle pieces fit into a more interwoven and functional system?
A functional government is almost that's going to be difficult to achieve. But if we're going to improve transportation, it's one area where you get what you pay for. If you don't come up with the revenues, you're not going to have better roads, better maintained roads, additional tunnels in this area. If you don't come up with the money, you're not going to have the airports that are more efficient. There are a lot of overlapping jurisdictions, but if you're going to improve it, it's really money. The House passed the Moving Forward Act, which is about $1 trillion in funding. It includes, for the first time, I chair the Education and Labor Committee, so I'm delighted that it includes significant funding for school construction, which is important now because of the need to improve the ventilation systems in the schools. It also includes housing money. But most of all, it's roads and bridges. Broadband is always mentioned when you talk about infrastructure. If you're going to improve the infrastructure program, you've got to come up with the funds. $1 trillion is a lot of money, but it's only half to 2/3 of the cost of the tax cut that did not produce any jobs. To talk about the $130 billion school construction part of the Moving Forward Act produces many times more jobs than the entire $1.5 to $1.9 trillion tax cut that passed a few years ago. So in terms of affordability, we should have done an infrastructure package. I think it would have done a lot more for the economy. You would have seen an impact on the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate has been going down, drifting down, drifting down. You can't show a wrinkle in that curve after the tax cut passed. The number of jobs created per month has been steady for the last 6 or 7 years at about 200,000. Not a wrinkle in that graph as a result of a 1.5 to 1.9 trillion tax bill. I think if you did an infrastructure bill, you would have seen a significant impact on unemployment and jobs created. And from a jobs creating point of view, it would have been a much better use of the taxpayers' money. But we need the money for the ports. We need money for roads, bridges, tunnels, the housing, school construction, and broadband capabilities if we're going to move forward with a functioning economy.
Congressman Bobby Scott, thank you so much. On behalf of our 3 chamber sponsors, Angie and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, and we look forward to being able to share this conversation with the Peninsula's business community.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you.